This is January the 14th, 2013. My name is Pauline Graivier, and I am interviewing Milton Loeb, who has been a Dallas resident since he was born. And Milton, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi. Been looking forward to talking with you. As a Jewish resident since you were born, would you talk a little bit about some of your earliest memories of Dallas?
The first thing I remember is when my sister was born. I was 3 years old. 3? Yeah, I was 3.
And that your sister May Sable, and she was, did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, and 3 years younger, and you remembered that as your very first thing? It's amazing.
Yes.
Okay, so go on, tell me some more. What was it like growing up in Dallas at that time? So that was 1933?
33.
33.
I had a really idyllic upbringing.
You what?
Idyllic upbringing.
An idyllic upbringing.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
I was born on Versailles, in University Park.
So you lived in the bubble.
And went to Bradfield Elementary until we moved to Turtle Creek, where I started University Park.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Elementary. That was I would have been 8
mm-hmm.
at that point.
And then you went to Highland Park High School.
Well, it ended up for a year a year or two at Armstrong.
Uh-huh.
That was when they were heading toward middle schools.
Uh-huh.
You know.
And then
And
went
then
on.
Highland Park Junior High and Highland Park High School.
Now, there weren't a lot of Jewish kids who were at Highland Park at that time. Still are not an awful lot.
Not a great number.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever have anything happen that was it all pleasant memories, or was there anything at all that had any?
All pleasant.
All pleasant.
It really was.
Aren't you lucky?
Indeed.
Mm-hmm. And then for college, where did you go?
Tulane. I was accepted at Vanderbilt and Tulane, and New Orleans appealed more to me than Nashville.
And then tell us about your career. First, we want to know something about your professional life.
Well, as long as we're on the subject of Tulane,
Mm-hmm. Tell me something.
my senior year, Joni came to school there, and that's how we met. She was a freshman and I was a senior.
I never knew that. Was it love at first sight?
Pretty close.
Really?
Pretty close, yeah, it was.
So how long after that did it take you to get her to marry you?
Well, let's see. We met in November of 53, and December of 54 we were married.
Whoa. Pretty fast worker.
Yeah.
And then did you come immediately to Dallas?
No, because I was in ROTC, I had a 2-year active obligation.
And where was that?
So that's how we started off married life.
I see. And
Fort
where was that?
Eustis, Virginia.
Uh-huh.
And I stayed there for training in my specialty, and then also I ended up being stationed there for 2 years.
What kind of work did you do? You said training in your specialty.
Well, it was called, it still is the Army Transportation Corps Center. And I took the Transportation Officer Basic course, which is required. And then from there, we got our assignments, and I was assigned to stay there. And for most of the time after the schooling there, I was a supply officer for a stevedore training facility.
Did any of that help you in your future career, just out of curiosity?
Only in managing people. No other part of it really, I don't think.
Sounds like a lot to me when you
Well-
talk about managing people. You sure had some different people there, I would imagine.
Yes,
And then did you then come back to Dallas?
yeah, we did.
So you go from an idyllic childhood and all the way up, and then you go off to the service for a couple of years, which sounds very pleasant.
And it was a good way to start a marriage because we were on our own.
And
And
then,
that was good for us.
can you think of, before we come back and start on your adult time, can you remember, now your parents were very prominent members of a Jewish community that was relatively small. Did you celebrate the holidays? Or how reformed were you?
We did. We did celebrate the holidays.
And you went to Temple Emmanuel,
Yes.
so that means you were confirmed. Was there even a thought of a bar mitzvah?
No. No.
Okay,
I
so,
was not that interested.
well, I don't think many people were really doing it at that
No.
time in the Reformed congregation.
Max Tonkin says he was the first bar mitzvah at Emmanuel.
Really? That's interesting too. Who was the rabbi when you were growing up?
David Lefkowitz.
Rabbi
And he
Lefkowitz.
confirmed me. I think I was in his last confirmation class, 1948.
And so there you were. Can you think of anything? Tell me about the dances. Do you remember when you were a teenager in junior high and high school? Do you remember the dances at Lee Park?
Oh, yes. Lots of entertaining was going on.
I think, yeah, there was. People really had parties a lot, didn't they?
Yes. Much more than now.
Did you have a girlfriend? You don't have to tell us who, but did you? Did you?
Well, I've got what I think's a funny story to tell about a girlfriend. Janice Cohen was in my confirmation class. And we liked each other. And we were in services. It would have been I guess they had Sunday services because of the Sunday school back then, along with Friday night and Saturday, of course. And we were sitting in a row, and I took off my ID bracelet to give her, but she was sitting several people away, so I simply passed it down to her. That wasn't very direct, was it? But she accepted it.
Accepted it. What were you, 16? 15? Something young.
Something, yeah, something in there.
So,
We rode a bus from out here to Sunday school. There was a lot of cutting up on the bus. Back in, this would have been 1998, we had two confirmation classes. It was our 49th and 50th anniversaries. We got together, the class of 47, the class of 48, and had a dinner, which was a lot of fun.
that must have been fun.
And at that dinner, one of the girls that I had dated and had hardly seen since told me that one time when we were on the Sunday school bus, my fly was open. And I said, now you tell me. I got a kick out of that.
That's pretty funny. And she waits until
And I
all
told-
those years
and I
later.
told her, it's starting to happen again at my age.
You have a good sense of humor, very dry sense of humor, Milton. I understand that you know a lot about your family, that you've sort of kept up. I see in this room there are pictures going back many generations. Can you tell us anything about your parents and their experience coming into Dallas, and maybe their parents and where they were from? Can you give us any of that history?
Well, my paternal grandfather was from Weisenheim, Germany, and moved here in moved to the U.S., not directly to Dallas. I'm not sure where he went first. But he was in Dallas by the 1880s. And my paternal grandmother was born in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother's father was born in New York State and moved to Palestine at some point, and in 1920 moved to Dallas.
You're talking about Palestine.
Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
There
That's
was.
important. That's important.
God.
Important distinction.
Yes, right. And at some point moved to Dallas.
Yes.
Okay. What kind of business were they in?
My father's father worked for Sanger Brothers. Good old Sanger Brothers for years.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother's father was in the wholesale grocery business.
Mm-hmm. And
Palestine and Buffalo, Texas.
That's where it's close to?
And yeah, they lived in Buffalo at one time too.
Not Buffalo Gap, but Buffalo.
Buffalo, which is not far from Palestine.
And Palestine is where in Texas? Around? Do
East.
you know? Because I don't even know.
East Texas.
East Texas. Okay. And then they came to Dallas, and okay. So, do you know why they came, or
My
do you know
mother's
much
father
about them?
came here because I think at that time the wholesale grocery business was kind of on its way out, and he was asked to come here and work with another family in wholesale hardware, the Higginbotham family.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Higginbotham Pearlstone Hardware Company. The side in the west, what is now called the West End,
Mm-hmm.
and the name of the business is still painted on the side of the building, even though the building's been converted.
Higginbotham Pearlstone, right? Well, isn't there a Pearlstone building that's close to Fair Park?
There is. That was his brother's,
Aha.
a grain elevator. And I
Mhm.
think you can still barely read the name Pearlstone on it. And supposedly there was a rock group years ago,
A what?
a rock music band
Okay.
who was looking about to have a name, what they were going to call themselves, and they saw this sign and called themselves Pearlstone. I don't know anything about them except that.
Well, how interesting. So this was Pearlstone rather than being remotely
Whatever.
Jewish.
One
It
of the
was.
other crazy names
They
that
sort-
rock
yes.
bands have.
That's. I was going to say Pearlstone Higginbotham.
No.
That's pretty long.
No, just Pearlstone.
Okay, I understand. That's very interesting. So, did that remain the family business?
Until they finally went out of business back in, I think it was the early 1990s.
No kidding.
And the family, actually the only person who was actually in the business from the family was my grandfather.
And so your mother and father, your mother, did she ever work, or did the people
No.
women didn't work in those days? So your father, did he remain? He didn't remain in that business. What did he do?
Actually, my father was never in it. Just my grandfather.
Okay. And what about your father?
He went to work in the 1920s for Pollock Paper Company. And he tells the story. I was born in 1933, the Depression. And as you know, in those days, women who gave birth stayed in the hospital maybe a week. It came time for her to get out, and the banks had been closed by President Roosevelt. So my father went to Lawrence Pollock and asked to get an advance in cash so he could bail Mother out of the hospital. Couldn't get it from the bank. And I guess no one was accepting checks because the banks were closed and they didn't know when they were going to open again. So he had to pay cash for whatever you wanted.
What a story. That's amazing. And that was when you were born?
Yes.
33. That's a heck of a story. I can just see a headline.
I think it's fun.
Yes, it is. It is. Can you think of anything else that stands out in your memory? What kind of, did you have any hobbies? Were there, now when you came back from the service, what kind of work did you do?
I got a job with Roger Snap Business Forms. My father had been selling Pollock paper products to them. And my first job was there for about 4 years, and then I was ready to move on and got a job with Dallas Federal Savings and Loan through my grandfather, who knew the chairman of the board.
It's always good to have some connections.
Yes,
yes, you have to work hard once you get there, but
right. Yeah.
that's...
And I was there 25 years.
Really? Oh. Dallas Federal. That wasn't the Fed.
Dallas Federal Savings and Loan Association.
The private.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I was with Southwestern Life for about 5 years after the savings and loan debacle, where Dallas Federal, well, it had already been bought by someone, and then it was absorbed into another one. You probably recall those bad days.
I certainly do.
Yeah.
Certainly do. Just about anybody knows what happened during those days. Yes. So you had a thriving career for 30 years.
Approximately, yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Or 30, actually it ended up being about 35.
So, Milton, what were your major influences, would you say, on your life in Dallas? I know that you've been active in various organizations. Have any of them been particularly your passion?
Well, one of the most interesting was being appointed to the Citizen Police Review Board of the city by Lois Finkelman when she was city council person. I had worked on her campaign, and she gave me the choice of several boards, and I chose that one. And I was on it for all of her 8 years.
Why did you choose that?
I just thought it really sounded interesting.
Can you think of any of the things that you did or heard about that we'd be interested in?
It started as a result of the board was created by the city council directly out of a problem with the police and the black community. A young black boy was shot in the back, sitting in the back seat of a police cruiser. And there was, as you might imagine, a lot of controversy about that. That's when...
Hello, Milton. This is a continuation of the interview that you had given so graciously a week ago.
Yes.
We had a little camera trouble, so I'm back again. And we had come to a stage where I said, let's stop. And you said that you had some other ideas and some other stories to tell me about your ancestors, parents, grandparents. What was it?
My maternal great-grandfather, Henry Ashe, was recruited out of Huntsville, Texas, into the Confederate Army at the age of 19. He was a recent immigrant from Prussia and didn't understand English very well. I don't know how long he was in the Confederate Army before he was accused of leading a revolt of several men who deserted the Army. But he was accused of being the leader, so he was court-martialed. And I have a wonderful copy of the file from the National Archives with the information in it. He was sentenced to wear a 30-pound ball and chain while he was in prison. Of course, he was released and pardoned like everyone else was after the end of the Civil War. But during his incarceration, the citizens of Huntsville wrote a letter, and it's signed by several dozen of them. I have a copy of that too, saying that he was a recent immigrant, didn't understand English, was a fine person, and that they should go easy on him.
Wow.
He ended up in Palestine, Texas, as a leading citizen, so all's well that ends well.
What a remarkable story.
I think it's fun.
Do you know what year he came over from Prussia?
Not exactly, no.
But the Civil War was in... When did he go in?
I'm assuming about 1862.
That's a heck of a story, Milton. I don't think he thought it was fun when he was in prison with a 30-pound ball and chain.
Not exactly.
Wow. Wow. I wonder how long it was before he was pardoned. How long was he incarcerated?
I have no idea. There's nothing in this record that indicates that.
And he went on to be a leading citizen of Palestine.
Yes.
Your family really goes back.
Pretty far.
Yeah. Now that was on which side of the family, Milton?
My mother's side.
Your mother's side. Darn it. That's really something. Anything else to tell us?
You had asked about the influence my parents had on me.
Yes, that was one of the big questions.
It was really by example. I don't recall. I'm sure they told me from time to time how I ought to act. I don't remember that as much as I remember them setting examples by the way they acted. And I took my cue from that.
Is that the way you raised your daughters?
Yes, definitely. With some verbal instructions, like most parents, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, you had no older brothers or sisters. You were the oldest of the family, and then you had your baby
Yes.
sister. Who were your role models? Do you remember? Who were the fellas that you ran around with in high school? I know you were part of an active crowd.
Yes, there was Bob Bloom, who lived across the street.
Went into advertising.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1946, Donnie Zale moved here from Wichita Falls.
That's
And we became good friends.
all the Zale stores.
And still are, yeah.
So those were your two best friends?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to turn this off for...
I read.
Okay, I'm not sure that was on. It should have been, but let me try once more. You do political work, and you've mostly worked for candidates for city council.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And that has been
And Martin Frost.
Martin Frost,
His
of course.
last campaign for U.S. House.
And then, as far as city council, though, it's been Lois Finkelman and
Linda Coop.
Mm-hmm. And now Lee Kleinman.
Now Lee Kleinman.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've done a great deal of volunteer work in the community. Would you tell us about some of those things?
Well, I mentioned earlier about the Citizen Police Review Board, which council people appoint.
Well, tell me what the Citizens Review Board...
It hears citizens who are not satisfied with police department investigations of their complaints.
So, for an example...
Unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of power to do much about it. And frankly, some of the people who appear before it are way out of line. They really didn't have a complaint. We've found certain officers have a tendency to get a little out of line in their enforcement.
So have you ever found...
And we, as if the police department didn't know about it, we pointed out to them if that comes up in one of our cases.
So give me an example of a case that you would hear, a typical case.
Oh, they ranged all over the place. Traffic stops, domestic disturbances.
So someone can come before this police review board, which is...
They would have previously complained to the police department.
I see.
And Internal Affairs Division would have investigated it and rendered their opinion. And if the citizen didn't like it, they could appeal to the board.
And then you would make recommendations, but they weren't always paid attention to?
Right.
I see. But at least we gave the citizens the opportunity.
Yes.
How long did you serve in that capacity?
For 8 years.
Oh. And tell us about working with the Jewish Family Service.
I was involved with their PRO program, Personal Resource Organizers, which was a very successful program. I believe it's still going on.
I can't hear you, Milt.
Personal Resource Organizers, which they abbreviated to PRO, P-R-O, which is designed to help older people who are having trouble keeping up with their business. There was no advising about investments or anything like that. It was paying their bills, if that's what they wanted, that sort of thing.
Well,
seeing that their bills got paid, for one thing.
and they would be bringing their receipts, and you would be trying to sort them out?
We'd go to them.
Oh.
Yeah. We'd go to their homes.
And other people, they were mostly like you from the banking business, from the professionals in the financial world. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so.
Okay. Can you think of any interesting stories or anything that happened?
Well, people were very appreciative. It was a very rewarding project to do.
Mm-hmm.
They really appreciated the help.
Wonderful.
They paid on a sliding scale what they could afford. Paid Jewish Family Service.
I think that's the way Jewish family service works, isn't it?
Many of their things they do.
And there was something else that you did for many years. Prepared
That
people's
was-
tax return.
Okay.
Is that right?
Did tax returns as a volunteer for AARP, who puts volunteers in libraries and rec centers all over town. I was at Preston Royal, very handy, Preston Royal Library.
Indeed.
That was also very rewarding. People really appreciated the not having to pay to have their tax returns prepared.
Did you find any unusual challenges?
Oh, yes. People who would argue about the way I had handled their tax return, what I had included in it as taxable income, et cetera, et cetera.
And your answer to them?
And then we had people who really shouldn't have come to us because their income was enough that they could afford to pay someone. But if it was within the scope of the things we could handle, we go ahead and do it.
Did you
As
ever,
a courtesy.
I was going to say, did you ever say to them, you might send a donation in or something?
On occasion, yeah. I did.
Do you, just on the off chance, do you prepare your own tax return?
No, I don't. It's got, mine's got some things that are out of scope and that I never learned as a result because it was out of scope for what we could do as volunteers.
That
And
sounds.
it's more than I want to get involved in, so I let somebody else do it.
I think that's probably a very wise thing to do, Milton. Well, so tell me, as you look back on your life, what you have said to me last time and this time is, we've been so lucky. And it's true. You have 2 daughters. Where do they
And a
live?
son.
And a son. And where do they live?
Daughter's in the Woodlands, Texas, and Columbia, Maryland. Our son is in Atlanta.
And how many grandchildren do you have?
7. And recently won the first great-grandchild.
It's very
And
rewarding.
That's very exciting in a different way than grandchildren.
What's it
I
feel
can't
like?
describe it, but it's just different. And Joni agrees that it's,
What do your grandchildren call you?
they call me Grandpa. Simple as that, just Grandpa.
Joni says that they adore you. They want to be around you
That's
all.
awfully
Is that
nice.
right?
And they adore her, too,
I'm sure.
I assure you.
I can't thank you enough for agreeing to be interviewed in the first place
I appreciate the opportunity.
and coming back. So, letting me come back. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And mine, too. Thank you.